Joining me on set is Chris Moore from our International Affairs Desk. Welcome, Chris. Tell us more about the details. What came out of this summit?
We got, first of all, there, as you saw, were claims of unity from Angela Merkel and Emmanuel Macron. It's no secret that there are vastly differing shades of opinion within the EU going on in the background. Enough also in the short term, I guess, to reassure Italy. Obviously, this most recent crisis sparked when Italy's hardline Interior Minister Matteo Salvini started refusing the right to land to various migrant vessels. Having said that, in terms of concrete proposals, it's all still a little bit vague and voluntary. What we do have is this promise to set up asylum processing centres in various parts of the EU. We don't know exactly which countries are going to do that, and as I said, that will be voluntary. What Merkel and Macron want really is a unity across Europe on this. That doesn't really exist. What Macron wants is these so-called disembarkation centres, which would process people outside the EU, sort economic migrants from asylum seekers in countries outside EU territory. That's something which has run into hot water amongst African and North African nations. We were told at this meeting that that's something the EU will continue to work towards. Told also that there'll be a beefed up border police force and more help for Libya, which is going to be something which human rights groups will be looking at very closely. They've repeatedly expressed their concern in terms of the way people are treated in Libya as they make their way north towards the Mediterranean crossing to Italy. The Italians say they have at last not been left alone. This was also about Angela Merkel being able to say to her domestic critics, led by her own hardline interior minister, that Germany wouldn't be left alone. Yes, a lot of these new arrivals come to Italy, but many of them then go on to other countries, primarily perhaps Germany. And this issue of secondary movement is something which Merkel's critics back home wanted to see movement on.
Speaking of Merkel, she said this was a make or break moment for the EU. Did she get what she wanted?
In the short term, yes, as in she was able to sort of like portray European unity, though, as she said herself then, as I've been saying, the details do really remain to be hammered out. It was obviously threatening on one level her coalition back home because of the divisions with Horst Seehofer, her interior minister, but really the idea of countries increasingly want to do things unilaterally, taking control of their own borders. That's obviously very worrying to Angela Merkel in the way that she sees Europe, the way that she thinks Europe should operate. It's a threat potentially to what she sees as one of the EU's greatest achievements, namely the freedom of movement and the Schengen area. We did hear from Donald Tusk there saying, well, I'm sorry if you find some of these proposals a little bit hard line, but if we don't find agreement on this now, then the real tough guys will take over. And that's an acknowledgement, really, that the effects that the likes of Eastern leaders like Viktor Orban, but also Matteo Salvini, the so-called populists, are having on other Europeans in terms of migration policy.
Chris Moore, thank you so much for that analysis. And now let's turn to